Since the advent of Shilonen back in version 5.1, the Geo element has turned over a new leaf, with Navia and Shiori bolstering the Geo damage dealing department and Shilonen being one of the best general supports in the game. Though Geo no longer follows the mono element win condition like it used to, its new characters have managed to successfully pull it out of being the worst element in the game, begging the question, which element is the worst now? Players generally look to be in agreement that Cryo hasn't been doing too hot over the past couple of years. Not only has there not been any real major updates to the Cryo category throughout 2024, but its hallmark reaction freeze has been getting systematically phased out of the game due to how polarizing it is. Yet at the same time, most of Cryo's characters were designed around facilitating the reaction in question. Even after Solali came out, fans were disappointed to find out she doesn't even do anything for the element she represents, choosing instead to help out Pyro and Hydro instead. Needless to say, the Cryo element has been going through a winter of sorts, widely considered the worst attribute in the game right now. But with Escoffier having just been released, is she able to turn things around for Cryo, or does she only make things more problematic? We're going to be looking through her design and gameplay to find out which one it is. By the way, for those looking to whale on Escoffier, I want to present today's sponsor, LD Shop. You may have heard of it before. It's a top-up service that gives you in-game currency at a bargain price, potentially up to 15% off. All you have to do is enter your server and game ID and it will be sent to you within minutes. As you can see on screen, it's a very simple process. Just click on what you want to buy, then put your game ID and server, and wait a few minutes, and there you go. It should arrive without delay. So if you're looking to buy a ton of pulls for Escoffier and her Litecoin, you can use my link and get a 10 and 5% off coupon, which can save you up to 50 bucks. Also, if you haven't yet bought the double up bonus, you will receive it using LD Shop as well. Those who spend over $80 will also get a free VIP membership, which comes with a free Welkin too. Whether you spend only on like Battle Pass or Welkin, or if you drop a couple hundred a month every new banner, LD Shop will consistently save you over the long run, so use my link on screen or in the description below to get started on saving. Thanks again to LD Shop for sponsoring the video, but for now, back to topic. There are two problems with the Cryo roster at the present moment. Problem 1, the roster is outdated. The only Cryo DPS unit that's even remotely relevant at the moment is Risley. Not saying Ayaka and Ganyu don't see play, but the roster as a whole is just old. We need more Cryo supports and DPS units. I mean, technically we got a Cryo support through Silali, but she's the fakest Cryo unit to ever exist. DPS wise, the power levels of Ayaka, Ganyu, and Risley are all really far below version 4 and 5 level, so we need new units first and foremost. Problem 2, the reactions are all kind of weak at the moment. Reverse Melt is pragmatically less worth going after than Reverse Vaporize, and Superconduct may as well not exist. Freeze is still one of the most broken reactions in the game, but due to how overpowered it can be, it's either tier 0 or useless. There needs to be a middle ground. Escoffier is a Cryo support unit, and unlike Silali, she's an actual support for Cryo, presenting an opportunity to address both problems, at least until we get a new Cryo DPS. It just so happens that she likes to work on the freeze reaction, or at the least, the components required to make freeze, Hydro and Cryo, so we'll start there. Escoffier is a 4 passive as so depending on how many Cryo and or Hydro characters are in the party, she can shred the Hydro and Cryo res of nearby opponents by 5, 10, 15, or 55%. The highest res shred we've had up until now has been 40% through Virtus and Venner, and there's a good reason all shreds are at that breakpoint or less. The way res shred works is that it only has value if the enemy has resistances to begin with. If they drop to 0 res, any subsequent shredding gets halved, and so throughout most of Genshin's timeline there was nary a need for any more than 35 to 40%. But over time, enemies have begun to appear with a lot more, prompting the need for multiple sources like Shilonen and Kazuha for example. 55% shred is good because most noteworthy enemies generally have more than 40%, but they don't have like 70-80%. So having one source of 55 is much more efficient since it frees up your other party slot for something else. VV supports like Kazuha and Sucrose can do other things, but circumstantially speaking, 55% res shred is a pretty big deal since we're fighting enemies with a lot more than 40% res now, and that's without considering anything else in her kit. Few things to note about this. In contrast to Chevris and Nilu, who explicitly require only 2 elements to be in their party, Escoffier is a lot more accommodating in that department. To start, she does allow you the option to have non-Cryo or Hydro members in your party if you so desire. However, considering the number scaling being 5, 10, 15, and then 55, she implicitly requires you to have a full party of Hydro and or Cryo. There's one more thing to make note of. It doesn't say you have to have one of each. You can do a full Cryo party if you want. What this means is that while Escoffier gives out the impression of doing to freeze what Chevris and Nilu do to Overload and Bloom respectively, the Chef is more of a personal DPS booster than a reaction one, which means she can be a huge buff to Cryo and Hydro DPS units with or without freeze. That being said, I don't know why you'd ever want to go mono Cryo since Hydro supports are incredibly useful to have. But just from her A4 passive, this presents a substantial buff to every Cryo attacker in the game right now, Ayaka, Ganyu, and Risley. as well as of course any future cryo attackers who come out. Moreover, it's a major boost to any team that has multiple sub-DPSers too. She'll be buffing not just the main carry's damage, but the DPS of any off-field attackers like Farina, Yelan, and of course, her own abilities too. On that note, let's take a moment to look over the rest of Escoffier's kit, which also has a ton of use behind it. Her elemental skill has two variants, a tap and hold version. The tap version is for actual combat, while the hold version is more for cooking. Literally. Anyway, the tap version does cryo damage in an area, then summons her little pot to follow you and deal cryo damage to random targets, giving her consistent cryo application. With a 20-second duration and 15-second cooldown, she has infinite uptime. And what's more, the scaling's actually really freaking good. 216% in rank 10, which is a lot for a summon attack. For reference, Mavuika's skill damage is 230%, so we know with all certainty Escoffier has Natlan power scaling. In line with version 4 and 5 units, Escoffier's Elemental Burst is a blast of cryo damage in a wide area with over 1000% scaling to it, very strong. More importantly, it's an instant party-wide heal for a huge amount. Assuming you build enough attack on her, Escoffier can heal for easily upwards of 10k with her ultimate. In addition, her A1 passive makes it so for 5 seconds after her burst, the active unit regens health per second, so it's a party-wide heal and regen altogether. I believe she might be the first healing support in the game who actually deals a ton of damage. Normally when you think of healers, they do nothing but that and maybe some elemental application like Kokomi. Shilonen was the biggest healing power creep we had yet with her buffs, but Escoffier actually does DPS. Her healing scales off attack, so by building DPS on her, you deal more damage and heal for more as well. Factoring the 55% shred on her A4, and she could contribute a lot. The whole package, healing, damage, and buffing, or debuffing to be exact. Actually no, she can do buffing if you get her constellations. For her C1, if you have all 4 party members, Cryo and or Hydro, which you most likely will, the entire party gets 60% bonus crit damage on cryo attacks for 15 seconds after using her skill, or burst. With her skill having a 15-second cooldown, you can assume her C1's up forever. The rest of her constellations are mostly designed to increase her healing and personal DPS. But this is the first time I've seen a healing support who does actual damage. Kokomi could do it, but only if you played her as the main attacker. Even Shilonen doesn't really attack for a whole lot. What Escoffier aims to accomplish here is essentially make up for the absence of damage augmentation from Freeze. Unlike most other reactions that deal damage, Freeze doesn't do anything, it simply keeps targets in place unable to move or attack. The ideal was that because you don't have to waste time worrying about what the enemy is doing, you could focus on your own reaction, thereby not missing any uptime, or even bring more offense to the field by relinquishing your healer slot. Unsurprisingly though, being able to straight up ignore enemy formations or patterns and effectively play solitaire doesn't make for the most interactive game design, hence why they try to prevent you from chasing bosses and chambers with Freeze. Escoffier makes up for that, and she does so in a way that's pretty clever. She prevents any kind of team abuse through her breakpoints. If it was like 10, 25, 40, 55, people would be more than happy to just take the 40% if they meant they could bring someone else like Shilonen or Kasuha for a better trade-off. She also prevents any overpowered Hydro characters from taking advantage of it too. Muladin can use Escoffier because she depends on forward vaporize, which you can't have if you bring the latter unless you miss out on the 55% shred. Nevalette's a bit complicated. For C0 Nevalette, you're already forfeiting the third reaction due to Farina, so 125% on A1 to 110% is absolutely worth doing if it means getting 55% Hydro shred and a healer compressed into one character. C1 Nevalette, however, is a downgrade because you're giving him 35% going from 160 to 125 if you want to bring her. So for base Nevalette, Escoffier is a boost. C1 Nevalette not so much, which ultimately still fits into that goal of not making overpowered units even more overpowered. Point being they thought this through. Or did they really? From an objective standpoint, Escoffier is a phenomenal character in the sense that she's without question the best cryo support in the game for anything cryo DPS related, and she can be a good potential Hydro support for any Hydro characters who rely on some kind of mono Hydro or 3 Hydro 1 cryo formation. 55% shred, tons of personal damage, and a potential 60% crit damage boost on C1. What exactly do I mean by did they really then? Properties wise, nothing is wrong with the character, in fact everything is right about the character. Short term wise, Hoyo saved cryo. Escoffier will push Ayaka, Ganyu, and Risley to insane heights, especially with the right team. For example, you can go Ayaka, Farina, Esco, and Shunhe, or Ayaka, Farina, Esco, and Yelan. This team's like on par with Generation 2 hypercarries like Shao with Farza, Navia, etc. at the least. She may even be able to compete with Gen 3 ones like Nadlan teams. Considering Ayaka's from version 2, Escoffier was as big of a buff to her as Farina was for a lot of teams. So to be fair, nothing is wrong with the character herself. But there is a potential problem that some people have taken notice of and brought to my attention. She might be too good. Escoffier is the most role-consolidated support we've had in a long time, and biggest of all, she's got the power budget of a 5-star character. Her 55% shred alone is groundbreaking to see on a support. As mentioned earlier, no one has come even close to that from a single source. But then on top of that, she can benefit from her own buffs by dishing out a lot of damage of her own and heal the party immediately as well, making her synergize amazingly with Verena. Thing is, Escoffier needs to be this good if they want to compensate for how badly they screwed over cryo teams by nerfing freeze to the ground. So much of the existing cryo roster was built and balanced around the freeze mechanic in mind, so when they made the reaction close to unviable in Abyss, all of those units were crippled as a result. So in that sense, Escoffier saved cryo by bailing them out, but depending on how you look at it, she may have also potentially bricked the element. I'm not trying to be a doomer about this either. Try to look at it like this. With how strong she is in tandem with the broken Hydra supports you have like Farina and Yelan, all cryo damage dealers will be and must be designed with consideration of the chef being added to the mix. For example, Mavuika was made insanely broken, but they added measures to prevent you from Unga Bungaing a team of all the best supports by forcing you to throw in Night Soul users. Granted, Zalali and Shilonen are two of the best supports in the game, so a lot of good that did, but where I'm getting at is that Hoyo takes other characters into account when balancing units. Escoffier is so powerful of a Cryo DPS support, a possible repercussion of her very existence might be that cryo units have to be kept marginally weaker in personal strength than the DPSs of other elements to keep in mind that Escoffier can increase the DPS and by extension the team's overall DPS while also providing healing, therefore not needing to give up a party slot for a sustain option. The end result is that future cryo units by consequence will be forced to have her because without her they will be that much worse. Despite not being a competitive game, you can basically akin Escoffier to a balanced nightmare. Cryo DPS units have to be balanced around her because if they try to make them strong on their own, Escoffier will make them overpowered to hell. Let's say you were to make a future damage dealer the same in strength as Chaska, Varesa, Molani, Mavuika, Escoffier will make them the best in the game. So you can't do that for the sake of managing power creep. Not to mention it would piss off a lot of people if not even a few months after Mavuika broke the ceiling, there was another character breaking the ceiling again. Conversely, intentionally making a character underpowered out of consideration for Escoffier tying loose ends is also a bad idea for two reasons. First, it's just bad game design. It's more acceptable if characters are balanced with Bennett in mind because he's free, everyone can get him easily. But a limited 5-star character would be problematic. Making cryo DPS characters and then adding Fine Princess as must-have Escoffier to actually use doesn't make for a great selling point. Second, we'd be right back to where we started with the cryo roster being held hostage by an overpowered mechanic, freeze. Only now instead of freeze, it's Escoffier. This creates a difficult situation bordering on catch-22. On one hand, the entire cryo roster needs help. Even Risley, who's not doing too bad, could use some extra help in staying competitive against the next generation of attackers. In that sense, Escoffier succeeded in helping them out with their overtuned, role-consolidated kit. On the other, it imposes a bottleneck on future cryo attackers, if we act under the assumption that Hoyo was still trying to keep a tight belt around power creep in Genshin. Honestly, I'm not even sure if that statement applies anymore in light of how strong version 5 units are collectively and the recent Spiral Abyss power spiking in total health pool, but let's just assume Mavuika was the farthest they plan to go for the foreseeable future. With respect to power creep, Hoyo cannot make a new cryo DPS character that strong since if they do, Escoffier will cause them to overpower Mavuika. If they want to make them only be on equal grounds with Mavuika, or more modestly make them as strong as say Varesa, Molani, Chaska and whatnot, the cryo unit in question will have to be measurably weaker than them to count for the chef, which again isn't a very big selling point. You might be wondering why am I making a big deal out of this? They made Nevalette overpowered at base and then made Verena, who is also overpowered, making him doubly so. They did, yes, but we're talking about the Hydro Sovereign and Hydro X Archon. Hoyo's got looser constraints when it comes to big names. Hypothetically, if someone powerful like Skirk is a cryo attacker, then maybe they'll be cool with making her overpowered given lore-wise, Child claims she can kick his ass using only one hand. So for all I know, maybe Hoyo just doesn't give a flying f**k about balance anymore and is pulling an HSR on power creep. Regardless, it's definitely one of those problems without a clear good answer. On a broader level, I think another topic of discussion to have is whether or not we should even care to maintain the relevance of older units. All of this is only an issue because Hoyo is still trying to preserve version 1, 2, and 3 characters. Escoffier demonstrably feels like she was made with old characters in mind, not really new ones. I mean yes, she's meant for new ones too, but the way they word in her moveset feels like a care package for the cryo roster and I appreciate that. It does call to attention though, should they even focus on old characters or should they just look towards the future? I don't think they can do both. The only way they can is by directly buffing older units the way Starrell's doing for units like Jingliu, Blade, and Silver Wolf. Anything that would indirectly buff a weaker unit buffs a stronger one too. I guess to summarize Escoffier, fantastic unit, brings a lot to the table, no pun intended, and is a terrific, very much needed support for the cryo roster. However, she could be so good that it presents a potential bottleneck for future Cryo DPS units, at least if Hoyo doesn't want anyone to be stronger than Mavuika for a while. What do you guys think about this? Do you think I'm freaking out over nothing, or do you agree with my thoughts? Let me know in the comments down below. For now, if you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe would be much appreciated. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other character first impressions videos if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.